This is Disc 2 of 3 Seconds by Dr. Les Parrott. Chapter 2. It takes 3 seconds to embrace a good challenge. It's kind of fun to do the impossible. Walt Disney.
Seth Gary has managed some of the world's finest hotels. While he was still in college as one of my students, he started at the bottom by working as a clerk at the Four Seasons Olympic Hotel in Seattle. That eventually led to managing a 5-star resort in California and then one in the Hawaiian Islands. I had dinner recently with Seth, and knowing that I was writing this book, he asked me about some of the chapters. When I mentioned this topic, embrace a good challenge, he quickly quipped, "That's my career in a nutshell." "What do you mean?" I asked. "It's the first thing I learned in the hotel business, and it still applies to every day I go to work," he replied. "In fact, it is so ingrained into me," he said, "that it applies to much more than just my work." I was instantly intrigued. For the next hour, I pulled from Seth story after story about how he has learned to embrace a good challenge and how it has led him to where he is today. One example that he shared with me came when he was the overnight manager at the Four Seasons. "It was about 6 a.m. when a guest came to me with an opportunity," he said. "An opportunity?" I asked. "Right, we don't call them problems in my business. Guests bring us opportunities." I was taking notes on the back of a paper napkin as Seth talked. He'd come in from Chicago for business and arrived late the night before he was to give a presentation at an important meeting at 8 a.m. His airline had lost one of his bags, and they told him they'd deliver it during the night, but they hadn't. He had the bag that included his shirts, ties, and personal items, but not the bag that contained his suit and shoes. He was frantic when he came to the desk that morning. "So what did you do?" I asked. "Well, it was too early to phone any local stores. They weren't open at that hour. I tried calling Nordstrom to see if there were any early arriving associates who might be stocking inventory, but nobody answered the phone. After a few more phone calls to other men's stores in the area, I realized we were running out of options. Then it hit me. The uniform manager at the hotel lived nearby. I gave her a call, and she arrived within 30 minutes. "Don't tell me you put him in a uniform," I said. "Not quite," Seth continued, "but we did get him set up with a new pair of black slacks, and then I borrowed a sports coat that we had available in our dining room. It paired well with the slacks that the uniform manager busily hemmed for a perfect fit. All we were missing now was a pair of shoes. Of course, we don't stock shoes for guests or employees. I asked him if he happened to be a size 10. Well, it happened to be his size. So I took off my shoes and had them polished, and our guest was off to give his presentation with no one the wiser. He even had time for a cup of coffee before he left." "So you worked the rest of your shift without shoes?" I asked. "You got it. 2 hours later, I led the manager's morning meeting in my socks. My colleagues loved it." "Okay, so this kind of thing only happens at the Four Seasons Hotel, right?" "I don't know, but I learned from the beginning how valuable it is to embrace a challenge, no matter where you work or what you do. I suppose I could have shrugged my shoulders and told this guest that there was nothing I could do for him," said Seth. "After all, nothing in my job description, even at a service-friendly place like my hotel, said anything about loaning a guest my own shoes. But I love a challenge, and I knew I could make this guy's day, not to mention his presentation, if I showed some initiative and did what I could." Exactly what is a challenge? Did you notice that little phrase Seth used? He said, "I love a challenge." This is the sentiment of everyone who knows how to do whatever it takes. So I ask you, do you love a challenge? Do you see problems as an opportunity or an obstacle? Let's start by clarifying the word challenge. The dictionary definition is quite simple. It's a call to engage in a contest, a fight, or a competition. It evokes the image of a duel. I believe that's just what embracing a challenge is about. It's contesting the idea that says there's nothing I can do. It's disputing it, fighting it. It's dueling it to defeat. When you embrace a challenge, big or small, you are taking a dare. You are mustering your courage to see a possibility where most others don't even try to look. Every student of U.S. history knows Susan B. Anthony to be one of the great American examples of courage. A suffragist at the turn of the 20th century, she had a keen mind and a great ability to inspire. Ignoring opposition at every turn, Anthony traveled and lectured across the nation to secure the vote for every citizen. She remained active in her cause for her entire life, always exhorting her followers to continue fighting for the goal to which they were dedicated. Just before her death, on March 13, 1906, She left them with these final words: "Failure is impossible." It can't be said much better than that. This is the creed of everyone who embraces a challenge. Whether you are embracing the challenge of a great injustice or a minute difficulty, it comes down to believing that failure is not an option. If you are naturally inclined to engage in a contest, a fight, or a competition when faced with a challenge, count yourself among the minority. It's not the natural first impulse for most of us. Why? Because it's a lot easier to give up, give in, and not even give possibility a fighting chance. The number one reason people resist a challenge. George Danzig was a senior at Stanford University during the Depression. All the seniors knew they'd be joining unemployment lines when the class graduated. There was a slim chance that the top person in the class might get a teaching job. George was not at the head of his class, but he hoped that if he achieved a perfect score on the final exam, he might be given a job. He studied so hard for the exam that he arrived late to class. When he got there, the other students were already hard at work. Embarrassed, he just picked up his exam booklet and slunk into his desk. He saw that besides the 8 problems on the test paper, there were 2 more written on the board. He diligently worked the 8 problems on the test paper, then started on the 2 on the board. But try as he might, he couldn't solve either of them. He was devastated. Out of the 10 problems, he knew he had missed 2 for sure. But just as he was about to hand in his paper, he took a chance and asked the professor if he could have more time to work on the 2 he had missed. He was surprised when the professor agreed to give him 2 more days. Danzig rushed home and plunged into those 2 equations with a vengeance. After hours and hours, he could find the solution for only one of them. Out of time to solve the other problem, he turned in the test. He was certain he had lost all chance of a job. It was the darkest moment of his life. Early the next morning, Danzig was jolted awake by a pounding on his door. He opened it to find his mathematics professor, very excited. "George, George," he kept shouting, "you've made mathematics history." He didn't know what his professor was talking about, so the professor explained. Before the exam, he had lectured the class on the need to keep trying in spite of setback and failure. Don't be discouraged, he had counseled the students. Remember, there are classic problems that no one can solve. Even Einstein was unable to unlock their secrets. Those were the 2 problems he wrote on the blackboard. Since George had come to class late and missed those opening remarks, he didn't know the problems on the board were up there as illustrations. He had no idea they were considered impossible to solve. He thought they were part of his exam and was determined to work them. Amazingly, he had solved one. He did the impossible. Danzig's work was published in the International Journal for Higher Mathematics, and he got a job as an assistant professor at Stanford during the height of the Depression. What are the chances that George Danzig would have tried so hard to solve the 2 problems on the board if he had heard they were impossible to solve? No doubt, he would have been like every other student in that classroom who simply took the exam and turned it in. He might have felt encouraged by what they represented, that even the greatest mathematical minds had not been able to solve every problem. Only because he didn't know they were impossible did he even attempt them. That's exactly why so many people resist a challenge. We give up because we're either told it's impossible or we come to believe it's impossible all on our own. Another big reason, people give up before trying. Not only do people resist a challenge because they believe it's impossible, they give up because, quite frankly, confronting challenges is a lot of work. And many of us don't really want to work. Trying to look busy, we perform lots of busy-looking functions without doing much of anything that's productive. The worst offenders are like George Costanza, the character on the popular Seinfeld sitcom. Avoiding work is one of his goals in life. In one episode, when he learns that the way to avoid new assignments is to look worried, he makes the most of it. When the boss asks him for help on a project, he pauses dramatically, gets a pained expression on his face, and shakes his head. And the boss says, "I can see you're already too busy, George. Don't worry about it." I saw this attitude in my first job. When I was still in high school, I worked a summer job on a maintenance crew at a local college. We did everything from paint dorm rooms to plant new shrubs to assemble classroom chairs. Every day was a little different, but we had one constant, the mid-morning break. That's when we'd head to the local donut shop for a 20-minute respite. What I noticed, even as a teenager, was that some workers on the crew seemed to draw that break out as long as possible. They'd walk extra slow to and from the break, they'd lose track of time while eating their donuts, or they'd rationalize an extra 10 more minutes before heading back to work because they got a late start. In other words, these guys worked harder at not working than others did at doing their jobs. And once we were back at the work site, it was amazing how these same guys found reasons not to pull their weight. Their back would act up, for example, just when they were needed to lift something heavy. So they did a lot of watching. Over the years, I've seen this same phenomenon in all kinds of settings. You have too. Whether it's a tenured professor who no longer produces, a middle manager who is barely present, a clerk who is too lazy to check inventory, or a sales associate who never quite follows up on a lead because he's already met his quota. Some people are dead set against doing anything more than they have to. You'll hear them say, "It's not worth the stress," or "I'll leave that to somebody else." They are simply spectators. Whatever the job, they'd rather sit back and watch others do the heavy lifting. The U.S. Navy has a term for sailors who slough off. They call them undermotivated problem sailors. The military acronym is LP, for low performer. But you don't have to be in the military to be an LP. These are people in any job who are looking for the easy way out. They prize comfort over courage, and what they don't know is that their inactivity, their lack of initiative, their resistance to problem solving is actually hazardous to their career and possibly their health. Why? Because too much comfort is dangerous, quite literally. Researchers at the University of California at Berkeley did an experiment some time ago that dramatically illustrates this point. They introduced an amoeba into a perfectly stress-free environment. Ideal temperature, optimal concentration of moisture, and constant food supply. The amoeba had an environment to which it had to make no adjustment whatsoever. In other words, it had no challenges. It didn't have to work. It had no stress. Yet, oddly enough, it died. Apparently, there is something about all living creatures, even amoebas, which demands challenge. We require change, adaptation, and challenge. Comfort alone will kill us. And yet the majority of people continue to resist a challenge. They give up before trying. Why you should embrace a challenge. When you learn to embrace a challenge, you lift the quality of your life. Challenge is a dragon with a gift in its mouth, said author Noella Evans. Tame the dragon and the gift is yours. Here are 5 specific gifts this quality will give you. Number 1, embracing a challenge takes you farther. When I worked that summer job on the maintenance crew, it didn't take long to figure out who among us was going somewhere and who was merely coasting. You've experienced the same thing on every job you've ever worked. You can survey your environment and readily see who is on the way up. The telltale sign? Invariably, the person on the way up is willing to take on a challenge. Kevin Lunn, a top-performing consultant at Deloitte Touche in Kansas City, tells me that his company is constantly looking for employees who know how to seize new opportunities. As he puts it, there's no revenue without initiative. In other words, their star performers stay alert for opportunities for add-ons that might extend a short-term project into a larger one. They aren't satisfied with simply going into the field to do their job. They see how they could extend that job by helping a client solve another challenge. In fact, they are, in a very real sense, on the lookout for challenges they can embrace. They not only embrace them, they pursue them. And it is this quality that takes them further. These are the employees who get better opportunities, make more money, and secure promotions. It's true in every field. Those who learn to embrace a challenge go farther. Number 2, embracing a challenge increases your joy. While the low performer comes to believe that the easy road is found by avoiding a challenge, they are, in truth, missing out on the pure pleasure of accomplishment. I think that's what Pearl Buck was getting at when she said, "The secret of joy in work is contained in one word, excellence. To know how to do something well is to enjoy it." Not far from my home in Seattle is a little bakery that prizes itself on pleasing its customers. If you want a certain kind of cookie that they don't have in their case, come back the next day and they'll have it for you. If you want a blueberry pie and blueberries are out of season, they'll track them down and make it. If you want a wedding cake made from an old family recipe, bring in the recipe and they'll make it for you. Why not just stick with the items you bake and leave it at that? I asked Julie, the owner. What's the fun of that? She responded. A new challenge is what keeps me excited about coming into work. And then she added, there's such a joy in doing work well. And there is. Ask anyone who has mastered the art of embracing a challenge. In fact, you don't even need to ask. You can see it on their face. They find great joy in accomplishment. Number 3, embracing a challenge keeps you optimistic. As I pointed out in the previous chapter, optimism buffers people against helplessness. And if you're looking for a concrete way to engender optimism in your own spirit, all you have to do is genuinely embrace a challenge. Optimism can't help but follow this kind of initiative. English explorer George Mallory dreamed of conquering Mount Everest, but he was killed in his last attempt. An apocryphal story about Mallory states that friends in England invited the survivors of the last expedition to a banquet honoring Mallory and his valiant group. At its close, a surviving team member stood and looked around the room at photos of Mallory and his comrades who had perished. Then in tears, he turned to face a huge picture of Mount Everest behind the banquet table. "Mount Everest," he said, "you defeated us once. You defeated us twice. You defeated us 3 times. But we shall someday defeat you because you can't get any bigger, and we can." This band of comrades remained optimistic because they were still embracing their challenge. They wouldn't let it go, and they kept hope alive. Like I said, you can't help but engender optimism when you're doing just that. Number 4, embracing a challenge that makes you tough. Jack Battle, a zookeeper, invited his friends Gary Richmond to watch an amazing phenomenon, an Angola giraffe giving birth. He stood next to Jack watching this elegant creature as she stood to her feet. That's when the calf's front hooves and head became visible. "When is she going to lie down?" Gary asked Jack. "She won't," he answered. "But her hindquarters are nearly 10 feet off the ground," he exclaimed. "Isn't anyone going to catch the calf?" "Try catching it if you want," Jack responded, "but its mother has enough strength in her hind legs to kick your head off." Soon the calf hurled forth, landing on his back. His mother waited for a minute, then kicked her baby, sending it sprawling head over hooves. "Why'd she do that?" he asked. "She wants it to get up." Whenever the baby ceased struggling to rise, the mother prodded it with a hearty kick. Finally, the calf stood, wobbly but upright. The mother kicked it off its feet again. "She wants it to remember how it got up," Jack offered. "In the wild, if you didn't quickly follow the herd, predators would pick it off." Most of us view challenges as unwelcome intrusions into our lives, but these intrusions have a way of prompting us to get up and keep going. They have a way of making us stronger, tougher. Whenever you embrace a challenge, you are sure to build your survival skills. Consider any company who has endured a downsize. Those who never learned how to handle a challenge are the first to go, right? And even if they aren't, those who embrace a challenge are the first to recover from the untamed territory of joblessness. After all, it's simply a matter of time before they are back on their feet again. Number 5, embracing a challenge keeps you growing. Perhaps the most important gift this quality will ever give you is the irrepressible ability to keep growing. Like Jack and his proverbial beanstalk, you will shoot toward the sky with each challenge you embrace. Why? Because challenges enlarge you. They push and pull you in ways you didn't think you could stretch. A rubber band is a perfect illustration of this. It's made to stretch. When it is not being stretched, it's small and relaxed, but as long as it remains in that shape, it is not doing what it is made to do. When it stretches, it is enlarged, it becomes tense and dynamic, and it does what it was intended to do. Ralph Waldo Emerson said, "Unless you try to do something beyond what you have already mastered, you will never grow." I couldn't agree more, and anyone who has learned the value of embracing a challenge knows exactly that. Number 6, embracing a good challenge. The famous English sculptor Henry Moore was asked a fascinating question by literary critic Donald Hall. "Now that you are 80, you must know the secret of life. What is it?" Moore paused ever so slightly, with just enough time to smile before answering. "The secret of life," he mused, "is to have a task, something you do your entire life, something you bring everything to every minute of the day for your whole life. And the most important thing is, it must be something you cannot possibly do." Now there's a life lesson. Do something you cannot possibly do. This gets at the heart of learning to embrace a good challenge. Can-do people take a dare. They love a goal that's just beyond their grasp. They shun even the slightest fear of failure while stepping up to a problem and rising to the challenge. They do all these things and more but let me give you 3 practical action steps on the road to cultivating this quality. Number 1, exchange problems for opportunities. Did you notice an important statement that Seth made in the opening story of this chapter? He said, guests don't bring us problems, they bring us opportunities. I love that line. And so does everyone who welcomes a challenge. The trouble, as I see it, is that many customer service people can resonate with that, but only on a large scale. We all love the dramatic and unique stories of meeting a challenge, like literally lending a customer your shoes. But if you truly want to master this practice, you've got to do it when small challenges arise as well. Let me give you as an example something that recently happened to my wife. She was buying a few items at a well-known grocery store. As she pulled out her credit card and handed it to the cashier, the woman directed her to slide it through the machine herself. Okay, but the magnetic strip on the back is nicked up and not working, she told the cashier. The woman examined the card, slid it through the machine herself, and sure enough, the magnetic strip wasn't working. With that, she rolled her eyes, mumbled something under her breath, and said, "We'll need another form of payment." "The card is still valid. You'll just need to punch in the numbers in manually," Leslie urged. "We don't like to do that because if you're off by one number, you'll charge the wrong person," the woman complained. "Well, I don't have another form of payment. Do you want me to put my items back?" "Give me the card," the cashier said in exasperation. Ever been there? Sure, we all have. We've all had to contend with a cranky person on the front lines of customer service who doesn't want to have anything to do with even the most minor of challenges. That's why, as you are learning to embrace more challenges, I want to urge you to be more mindful of small opportunities. Think of the difference it would have made to my wife as a customer of this store if the cashier had handled the situation this way. Leslie: "The magnetic strip on the back of my card is nicked and it's not working." Cashier: "Oh, no problem. I can key in the number by hand." Leslie: "I appreciate that. Sorry for the hassle." Cashier: "No worries. I just need to be sure I get all the numbers right here." It's as simple as that. Every day you encounter opportunities to embrace a small challenge, and each time you do just that, the more you train your brain for the bigger challenges that are bound to come your way. Number 2, inoculate yourself against critics. As a young boy growing up in New England, most of my summers were spent on the rocky coast of Maine, and every kid in that part of the country learns a lesson or two from the fishermen who tend the lobster pots and crab traps that line the shore. I'll never forget an unintentional lesson I learned at the age of 12 from a fisherman on a dock in York Harbor. He showed me how easy it is for a crab to escape from a trap, and why it never does. Crabs are agile and clever enough to get out of any crab trap, and yet they are caught by the thousands every day. Why? Because of a particularly human trait they possess. The wire cage of the trap, which holds the bait, has a hole in the top. Once the trap is lowered into the water, the crab will eventually climb in, and then a second crab, and a third. Eventually, the trap will be full of crabs and the bait will be gone. That's when an amazing phenomenon takes place among the crabs. One of the crabs will climb up the side of the cage to escape through the hole, but the others won't let him. They will pull him back in, repeatedly. Why? One theory is that a crab that feels trapped will attempt to climb anything to get to safety. Unfortunately, if all the crabs in the trap do the same thing, which they do, then instead of climbing up, they pull each other down. The outcome? No crab can escape. You can count on it. The crabs always prevent each other from succeeding. Ever feel like a crab trying to escape the trap? Do you ever feel like giving up because the people around you pull you down? Do you hear critical comments that tempt you to keep from trying? Sure, who doesn't? The difference between the person who succeeds and the person who fails is not whether they hear critical comments or not. Everyone has critics. The difference is found in how they handle criticism. As you embrace a challenge, you may hear that you're not qualified for it. You may hear that you're a dreamer or an idealist. You may hear that others have tried and failed. You may hear that you're wasting your time. Or you may hear that you simply don't have what it takes. What if Einstein would have listened to Robert Millikan, who won the Nobel Prize in Physics in 1923, when he said, "There is no likelihood that man can ever tap the power of the atom"? What if the Wright brothers would have listened to the President of England's Royal Society in 1885 when he said, "Heavier-than-air flying machines are impossible"? What if Henry Ford had listened to the American Road Congress, who stated, "It is an idle dream to imagine that automobiles will take the place of railways in the long-distance movement of passengers"? What if Bill Gates had listened to Ken Olsen, president of Digital Equipment Corporation, when he said there is no reason for any individual to have a computer in their home? What if Lance Armstrong would have listened to critics and skeptics who told him that winning 7 consecutive victories in the grueling Tour de France was an impossibility, not to mention overcoming cancer? I'll say it again. The difference between the person who succeeds and the person who fails at meeting a challenge is not whether they hear critical comments or not. The difference is found in whether they give in to these critical voices and give up trying. Negativity is a powerful force, but not for the person who is committed to doing whatever it takes. You won't find him or her wallowing in critical comments. They're too busy uncovering solutions that their critics never even try to find. Number 3, be willing to face the music of honest feedback. I've got to confess, there's a difference between inoculating yourself against critics and being open to feedback. The former has everything to do with resisting criticism that will drag you down, and the latter has to do with hearing what will ultimately lift you up to greater heights. Let me illustrate this with a personal story. One of the greatest challenges I have ever embraced was to step onto a stage in front of an audience and become a public speaker. It was something I felt called to do, but it scared me to death. With time and practice, I began to feel more comfortable in these settings, but deep down, I knew I hadn't really faced the challenge. Because I was getting invitations to speak, I knew I was an adequate public speaker, but I wanted to be better. I wanted to excel, and I knew I would never be the best I could be if I wasn't willing to face the music. That's when I invited feedback on my performance. More than 20 years ago now, I began by giving feedback forms to my audience. I still cringe when I think of some of the comments I read on those cards. I also asked speakers I respected to critique my tapes. Ouch, they were kind but honest. Ultimately, I hired a pro in New York City who had coached some of the top speakers and news anchors in the country. Talk about facing the music. She never minced her words. She went straight to the issue and didn't let up. With brutal honesty, she'd say something like, "There you go again. Why must you lean on the lectern like that? You look lazy." Or, "You're not enunciating the most important points. You're too timid. Say it clear and loud." Or, "Your face looks like it doesn't believe what your mouth is saying." Like I said, she didn't mince her words, and I owe much of my speaking career to her. Without straightforward feedback, it's almost impossible to learn the fine art of embracing a challenge, whatever it is. So if you are serious about learning to confront whatever stands in your way of doing whatever it takes, you've got to invite a person into your life that will force you to face the music. Let me underscore the point with a true story from the movie Music of the Heart. It's based on the life of Roberta Gaspari, who is played by Meryl Streep. Roberta is a single mother who teaches the violin to students in inner-city New York. Her passion and commitment inspires thousands of young people to excel in music and in life. And she enabled them to do so by literally getting them to face the music. In one scene, Roberta meets with the school principal and a mother of a student who argues that Roberta shouts at her students. Roberta maintains she only does so when they don't listen. The mother asks, "Didn't you tell them that they were making their parents sick?" Roberta laughs uncomfortably and tells her that she didn't say exactly that. The mother insists, "I'm raising Becky in a supportive atmosphere. I didn't send her to school to be abused." Roberta responds, "I'm just trying to teach them discipline, that's all. If you want to take a very difficult instrument, you have to take it seriously. You have to focus. You have to pay attention." The principal interrupts Roberta and tells her she should soften her comments. Roberta reluctantly agrees. In the next scene, Roberta is instructing her students, all about 10 years old. They are out of sync and playing badly, and they know it. Roberta pauses and says, "Well, that was pretty good. Not so bad." The students are surprised, and one says, "It wasn't. We stunk." Roberta responds, "Well, I wouldn't put it that way. I would just say that people could practice a little bit more." She asks a student if he practiced, and he says no. She encourages him to try a little harder for the next week. All you have to do is your best. One of the students speaks up and asks, "Roberta, why are you acting like that? Like nice?" "Well, don't you want me to be a nice teacher?" He answers that he already has nice teachers and wants variety. Another student says, "We like you better the way you used to be." All the students agree. One girl says, "I agree, this is even worse. You're acting weird now." Roberta smiles and says, "Okay, I take it all back. You stunk." All the kids laugh. Don't tell your parents that I said that. Let's do it again. Right this time. Stand up straight. Everyone who is serious about becoming better at embracing a challenge needs a Roberta Gaspari in their life. I don't know who this might be for you. It could be your boss, a respected peer, a seasoned mentor, a best friend. Whoever it is, they need to hear it from you directly. They need to hear you ask them to speak into your life. They need to hear you urge them to be honest. They need to understand your goal and how they can help you achieve it. So who is this person that can help you excel at facing a challenge? Chances are that you already have them in mind. All you have to do is ask. But if no one comes to mind, you need to find that person who can help you face the music and who is willing to speak honestly into your life. You need to find your Roberta Gaspari. And when you do, you'll be surprised how quickly you'll be making music. It takes 3 seconds to embrace a good challenge. There you have it, 3 action steps to help you on this road. Number 1, don't dismiss opportunities to embrace a challenge. Number 2, inoculate yourself against critics who will want to pull you down. And number 3, invite someone into your life to give honest feedback. Before I leave you in this chapter, I want to remind you of the power of a simple phrase. I love a challenge. I'll say it again. These 4 words are like a mantra for anyone who does whatever it takes. Say them to yourself right now. It takes just 3 seconds. You'll notice that even when you utter them in the abstract, without attaching them to a specific challenge, you actually empower a winning attitude. And when you say them out loud while facing a challenge, you'll discover their true power. As I wrote this chapter, I had to limit the number of stories I could have told you about people who practice this habit of embracing a challenge. I've collected a seemingly endless supply of inspirational stories of people who have overcome challenges, both big and small, to achieve something great. In fact, if I were only to look at stories I've collected of people who embraced a challenge to excel in the Olympic Games, I could easily fill a book of outstanding achievements. I don't want to overload you with a line of these inspirational people, so let me leave you with just one. Her name is Wilma Rudolph. Wilma was the 20th of 22 children. Some might say it was her mother who embraced a challenge. Born prematurely, doctors did not expect Wilma to survive. She did, but at the age of 4, she contracted double pneumonia and scarlet fever, leaving her left leg paralyzed and a bit deformed. She learned to walk with the aid of a metal brace. When Wilma was 9 years old, she was determined to remove the leg brace and walk without it. And she did. By age 13, she developed a rhythmic walk. That same year, she decided to begin running, and she did. She entered her first race and came in last. For the next 3 years, Wilma came in dead last in every race she entered, but she kept on running. And one day she won. Eventually, the little girl who was not supposed to live, and then who was not supposed to be able to walk, would win 3 gold medals in Rome's 1960 Olympic Games. You think Wilma Rudolph loved a challenge? You bet. And chances are that you do too. But if you're tempted to give in to your first impulse and say, it's too difficult to even attempt, you may just want to think of Wilma. Imagine the number of times she had to dispute the same impulse. Imagine the number of times she had to duel this attitude to defeat. Imagine the number of times she took 3 seconds to say to herself, I love a challenge. And imagine how it fueled her ability to do whatever it takes.
Chapter 3. It takes 3 seconds to fuel your passion. Only passions, great passions, can elevate the soul to great things. Dennis Diderot.
Every autumn I teach a class dedicated to helping my university students capture a vision for their lives. It's a general elective course, not required for anyone to graduate or fulfill a major. As a result, the students who show up are coming from every direction. Some are nursing majors, some are studying business, psychology, history, or computer science, and some are still trying to make up their minds. I have about 20 days of lectures spread over several weeks to help them picture a personal vision for their future, a vision that will fill their lives with meaning and passion. The kind of vision that quickens their heartbeat, the kind of vision that is not a means to something else, but a reward in and of itself. I'm not talking to them about how to land a good job or chart a career. I'm jam-packing my lectures with ancient wisdom and the latest research on how to seize your life by fully engaging the days you have on this planet. In short, I'm doing my best to give these students a defining moment that will lift their sights and forever change the course of their lives. That's no small feat with a room full of 20-somethings. Half of them are so passive they barely have plans for their weekend, let alone their life. And the other half are so idealistic that they believe the double doors of a dreamy future will automatically open upon graduation. That's why at the end of every autumn semester, I wonder whether the course really matters. It's the toughest course I ever teach, not for the students, but for me. I write and rewrite my lectures every year. I go to a lot of effort to coordinate snippets of various movie clips with real-life, inspiring stories to illustrate my lecture topics. I search through my context to find a few living lessons, people who I've met who are visionary and passionate, to come into the classroom and share their story. I do everything I can to make this course matter to my students. But at the end of the semester, I'm never really sure if it does. Don't get me wrong, I know the class is valuable, I know the content is solid, and I know it's often inspiring. What I don't know is whether it sticks, whether the message makes any difference in my students' lives after the semester is over. But then, every so often, I receive a letter that keeps me motivated. The latest came from Dave, a student who sat in my class some 5 years ago. Dear Dr. Parrott, I don't know if you'll remember me, but I felt compelled to send you this letter. I'm writing from Jakarta, Indonesia, where I'm working for an internationally known shoe company. It's my dream job, and I wouldn't have had it if I didn't take your course. At the time, my primary goal was to graduate, a first for somebody in my family, and find a decent job back home in Oregon. But one day in class, you had us write down what we would do with our lives if we were dreaming big, if time, money, and training were not a hurdle. I still have the notebook paper I wrote on that day. I said I wanted to live in Beaverton, Oregon, and eventually manage a local sporting goods store where my dad and my brother work. You read what I'd written and challenged me. Is this really your heart's passion? You asked me. Does this get your heart to race? Nobody had ever talked to me about my vision. Before your class, I'd never even thought about it. So with your prodding, I then wrote what I really wanted to do was work for Nike. Again, you challenged me to be more specific. So I wrote that I wanted to be a vice president and travel internationally and use my job to do good in the world, especially for less fortunate kids. You had me picture it. You had me describe my ideal day and my ideal job. Well, it was in your class that I got inspired and created a clear picture for my future. For the past 2 years, I've been traveling the globe promoting soccer tournaments for kids who, in some cases, would never even own a pair of shoes if it weren't for what I'm doing. We expect to reach 3 million kids in 39 countries over the next 2 years. It's completely thrilling, and I can't believe I'm getting paid for this. Anyway, I thought you'd want to know that you lifted my vision for what I could do with my life, and I'll always be grateful for that. This is the kind of letter that every professor longs for. They remind us that the work we're doing matters. They replenish our passion for teaching, and passion is what keeps us moving forward. Combined with vision, it works on us from the inside out, motivating us to keep working and striving. What passion will do for you? People who are unable to motivate themselves must be content with mediocrity, said Andrew Carnegie, no matter how impressive their other talents. Carnegie should know he was a self-made man in the 1800s who became the world's wealthiest philanthropist. Who wants to be content with mediocrity? Nobody who has passion. A motivated person is not about to settle for anything less than great. That's why passion is often the deciding difference between mediocrity and greatness. If a person has passion, you can be relatively sure they have both aligned their priorities to achieve greatness and cultivated enough persistence to get there. Passion aligns priorities. If you're barely able to put food on the table, pursuing passion is recklessly indulgent, right? And taking on a complex project is the last thing you should consider while slogging through difficult times. Yet that is exactly what writer J.K. Rowling did during the most onerous chapter of her life. After the breakup of her first marriage, she was a newly single mother, struggling to support her daughter in a new town where she knew virtually no one. In the midst of those circumstances, Rowling committed herself to her passion for writing and her vision of becoming a published novelist. I was very low, and I had to achieve something. Without the challenge, I would have gone stark raving mad, she said. It was 1994, and when her baby, Jessica, would fall asleep, Rowling would stroll her to the nearest cafe and seize the moments of peace to furiously scribble out tales of Harry Potter, boy wizard. The rest is literary history. Rowling, who once received welfare payments, is now estimated to be richer than the Queen of England. And it would have never happened without passion. Because of her passion, Rowling made huge sacrifices. Her top priority was writing her book, even when it meant relying on public assistance. Passion propels persistence. Burning desire to be or do something gives us staying power, says educator and author Marcia Sinitar. She's talking about passion, the quality that enables you to pick yourself up and start in again after a disappointment. Since every great vision is fraught with disappointments and setbacks along the way, passion is critical to our staying power. Todd Houston knows this about as well as anyone I can think of. When he saw an advertisement for climbers interested in setting new records, he immediately caught the vision. The objective was to break the speed record for scaling the highest elevation in each of the 50 United States. The record stood at just over 100 days. This was a goal that could stir Todd's passion. He sought the advice of expert climbers and trained hard, and as the start date of April 1994 approached, he was ready. Everything was on track until February. Then the sponsoring organization called Todd, telling him funding for the expedition had fallen through. The project was canceled. Todd was devastated. All his planning and training had been for nothing. But the more he considered his options, Todd realized something. While the means might not be there, his passion was alive and well. Todd immediately started seeking funding to keep the vision alive. He called his project Summit America, and he told himself and his supporters, God willing, I'll find a way to make this expedition happen. His hard work and determination paid off. In June, only 2 months later than the original launch date, Todd started his first climb on Mount McKinley in Alaska. One by one, he conquered the highest points in each state. On August 7, 1994, just 66 days after he started, Todd climbed the last peak in Hawaii. His expedition shattered the old climbing record by 35 days. Todd had triumphed over many obstacles and truly accomplished his dream goal, Summit America. But there is one more thing you should know about Todd, one detail that made him a very unlikely mountain climber. 13 years before Summit America, Todd Houston had his right leg amputated after a boating accident. When he finished his climbs, in 66 days, he broke the able-bodied record. Because of his personal faith and personal passion, Todd, a most unlikely climber of mountains, became a champion mountaineer. Achievers are often asked, where do you get your energy? How do you get so many things done? People ask the questions because they feel the person has a secret to their productivity, that they must know something others don't. But if there's any secret, it's found in a single word: passion. Can you imagine Pablo Picasso dragging himself into his painting studio and forcing himself to paint because it was on his schedule? Of course not. The image is absurd. He couldn't help but paint. It was his passion. If anything, he had to force himself to eat because his painting would consume him for hours on end. But you don't have to be a world-class artist to experience this kind of passion. A car mechanic or a welder can find passion in what they do. I have a friend who loves the challenge of finding out what makes a machine work. It started when he was a boy, fixing his mother's electric can opener. Last summer, he couldn't find a sprinkler system that would work right in his wife's garden, so he designed one himself and built it in his basement. In fact, if you walk through his house, you'll discover all kinds of unique mechanical contraptions he has built. From electric sunshades in the kitchen to a self-cleaning litter box for the cat, he has devoted countless hours to this kind of thing. He loves it. He'll set aside watching TV or going to movies in order to work in his shop. Psychologists call this phenomenon flow. It's the state of losing ourselves in our work. When we're experiencing flow, we seem to handle everything effortlessly and nimbly adapt to shifting demands. The motivation is built into the very thing we are doing, and it brings us delight in and of itself. Think of it this way. Many of us parents attempt to motivate our children through a system of rewards. For example, if you finish this page of math problems, I'll give you a piece of chocolate. We turn doing something unpleasant, solving the math problems, into a means of something pleasant. If a child has no internal passion for a task, we have to find an external motivator. As the father of a first grader, I know this from experience. Sometimes it seems like pure agony for my son to learn a list of spelling words or the names of the states. Of course, we adults can also be motivated by external rewards to do things we might not otherwise do. If you don't love your job, if you are seldom in the state of flow, you're probably only there because of the paycheck. But here's the thing. For the person with passion for their work, the reward is built into what they're doing. They find themselves in flow whenever they are devoting themselves to their vision. My work does that for me. Isn't it how you'd like to live your life? Traditional incentives miss the point when it comes to performing at our absolute best. To reach the top rung, people must love what they do and find pleasure in doing it. Passion begins with a vision. So what would you do if you suddenly found yourself independently wealthy without the need of a job? If you could do anything you wanted with your life, would it be what you're doing right now? Are you like Dave, my student who can't believe he gets paid for doing what he loves? If so, you're in the minority. But if you're not, I want to show you how you can find passion for what you do with your life. The first step is always a vision. Like my students, many of us let life happen to us, only seeing what's set before us. But everyone who has ever known the exhilaration of passion started with a vision. They saw beyond their circumstances. Here's what I mean. In 1774, John Adams boldly declared, "Someday I see a union of 13 states, a new nation independent from England." That seemed impossible at the time, yet just a few years later, against all odds, a new nation was born. In the late 1800s, the Wright brothers said someday people are going to fly through the air. 10 years after they made that statement, their plane lifted off the ground in Kitty Hawk, North Carolina. In 1907, Henry Ford told a small group of employees, someday automobiles will be affordable for almost every American family. 15 years later, his company couldn't make Model Ts fast enough. In the 1920s, Robert Woodruff, who was president of Coca-Cola for more than 3 decades, said, someday every man in uniform will be able to buy a bottle of Coke for 5 cents anywhere in the world. Even though the price has changed, Coca-Cola is now sold in 200 countries. In the 1940s, Billy Graham and a group of his friends said, someday we will fill stadiums all over the world where people can hear the gospel in person and on television. Today, over 1 billion people have seen at least one of his crusades. In 1974, Bill Gates and Paul Allen stood in Harvard Square and said, someday every home will have a personal computer and we can supply it with software. More than 100 million personal computers are used by people every day. Each one's passion was born from a vision, an actual picture of the future. They could see it, they could feel it, and in Robert Woodruff's case, they could even taste it. Once you capture a vision for the future and the role you play in it, passion is born. In fact, as I often tell my students, vision is a picture of the future that gives passion in the present. Let me say that again. Vision is a picture of the future that gives passion in the present. By the way, I don't believe you get only one vision for life, and if it doesn't come in college, you're out of luck. To the contrary, I think our vision often changes over time. Even if my students do discover a vision in my class, it's unlikely they'll be pursuing that exact vision 20, 10, or even 5 years later. That's good news if you're not 21 years old and you're reading this. No matter how old you are or how long you've gone without a vision, it's never too late to discover a vision that you can pursue with passion. Once you catch even a glimpse of what your future might hold, once you see a potential picture of what your life could be, passion is possible. The Bible puts it this way, without vision, people perish. Vision is essential to a life well lived, because vision almost always ensures passion. Without vision, our zest for living dies, and we wander zombie-like through our existence. How to capture your vision. Let's begin with the obvious. You get a picture that ignites your passion when you open your eyes to see it. This may sound self-evident, but most people are blind to their vision. Helen Keller was once asked, what would be worse than being born blind? She answered, to have sight without vision. For far too many people, that's exactly the case. I've long enjoyed hearing what happened when Disney World opened in Florida in 1971. Sadly, Walt passed away in 1966. At the park dedication, his widow was asked to speak. During her introduction, the MC said, Mrs. Disney, I just wish Walt would have been here to see this. She stood up to the podium, cleared her throat, and said, he did. And she's right. Walt saw it long before anyone else because he had a clear vision. So how does one go about the business of clearly seeing one's vision? I want to help you do just that. If we were sitting across the table from one another, I'd ask you about your experiences in your life, what you read or watch on television. I'd want to know what news stories grab your attention. I'd want to know about any tragedy you may have witnessed or experienced, or if there's a particular statistic that jars your spirit. I'd also want to know if you have any role models and if you ever feel like God is calling you to something that you may not even understand. Why all these seemingly unrelated topics? Because these are the most likely places you are to capture your vision, as long as you know to look. So I devote the bulk of this chapter to helping you examine the most proven places to find a vision. Number 1, emotion can drive a vision. One bright early morning in 1971, high above the McKenzie River outside Eugene, Oregon, Coach Bill Bowerman and his wife Barbara sat down for breakfast. Staring at, but not eating, the waffles on his plate, Bowerman was in the midst of an athletic epiphany. He saw the future of running shoes. In his 22-year career as coach of track and field at the University of Oregon, Bill Bowerman demonstrated his passion for running. He was always looking for ways to improve his runners' performance, attempting to provide them with great instruction and the best equipment. When he figured out that a single ounce removed from a miler's shoe meant the runner lifted 200 fewer pounds in a race, he became passionate about finding lightweight running shoes. When existing shoe brands didn't do what Bowerman needed, he searched for ways to make his own shoes. To that end, he partnered with one of his former students, Phil Knight, to found Blue Ribbon Sports in 1964. On this day, in 1971, while Bowerman was eating his waffles, he saw a new innovation, and with it, the opportunity to improve training, traction, and race times. Much to Barbara's chagrin, he was soon pouring rubber into her waffle iron. When he was done tinkering, he had created the modern waffle-bottom shoe. In 1972, Blue Ribbon Sports evolved into a more familiar brand, Nike. Bill Bowerman's passion for running started him on his quest for better shoes, and that quest opened his eyes to a new vision for creating those shoes. Bill Bowerman's love of running and his intense desire to equip his runners to succeed gave him a vision. And his pursuit of that vision, according to many running enthusiasts, changed the face of running and racing. Sometimes your heart compels you to pursue a vision like Bill Bowerman did. Other times the vision sneaks in, nudging and tugging until it fully captures your heart. That's what happened to Kevin Bradley. Over 15 years ago, Bradley was engrossed in the fast-paced, big-money world of Wall Street. A stockbroker in Baltimore, Bradley and his wife Marilyn were living comfortably. Like most big cities, Baltimore had its share of homeless people in the streets. Every day, Kevin walked to work past dozens of them. Most business people walked fast and avoided eye contact, but something within Kevin found that impossible. Instead, he got to know the people he passed. He learned their names, often took them to breakfast, and offered a listening and caring ear. I got really interested in who they were and how they got to where they were, says Bradley. As Kevin Bradley got to know the homeless, he began to sense a calling. It reminded him of a call to ministry that he'd sensed as a youth. Gradually, a vision formed within his heart for a ministry to the homeless. In 1991, after much prayer and Bible study, Bradley quit his job and started the Community Outreach Center, with the mission of helping the homeless become self-supporting, independent citizens. Today, their organization, now the Outreach Foundation, serves the homeless of Baltimore by meeting their immediate needs and providing them with training. The Foundation's Wings Life Skills Training Program, developed by Bradley, is a motivational and spiritual program that teaches men and women to channel their God-given talents and desires into productive careers. The Wings program is being used by organizations nationwide, and with many financial backers, the Outreach Foundation continues to grow. Ironically, the vision Kevin Bradley discovered led him to help other people find a vision and passion too. 5-month-old Laura Lamb became one of the world's youngest quadriplegics in 1979 when she and her mother, Cindy, were hit head-on by a drunk driver near their home in Maryland. The repeat offender had been traveling at 120 miles per hour. Less than a year later, on the other side of the country in California, 13-year-old Carrie Leitner was killed. The drunk driver who caused her death had been released from jail only 2 days prior on bail for his fourth drunk driving offense. He was driving with a valid California driver's license. Enraged, Carrie's mother, Candace Leitner, gathered friends and organized a group that they called MAD, Mothers Against Drunk Drivers. Soon Leitner and Lamb joined forces, and MAD went nationwide. Today, MAD has more than 600 chapters in all 50 states, and MAD's vision still propels them with white-hot passion. MAD, they said, will not close its doors until drunk drivers stop taking innocent lives. Bowerman and Bradley were motivated by the desire to meet a need. Lamb and Leitner were driven by pain. Through these emotions, they saw a vision for meeting the needs that they faced. I believe that the first place to look for a vision is often in the heart. Since vision and passion are so closely linked, your heart is the most likely source of vision. To examine your heart, ask yourself questions like these. What stirs my soul? What makes me angry? What breaks my heart? Examine the things that cause those feelings, and you might see a vision that you are already passionate about. Number 2, information can communicate a vision. Bono, the 42-year-old lead singer of the rock band U2, says, "The only thing that balances how preposterous it is to have to listen to an Irish rock star talk about these subjects is the weight of the subjects themselves." Bono has been talking over the past few years about two subjects, poverty and AIDS. He has made it his mission to communicate a vision for solving those problems, specifically on the continent of Africa. A lot of wealthy and famous people have taken on pet causes in the past without a lot of credibility or influence. So why does Bono have the ears of business people, politicians, musicians, and moguls? How did he end up on the cover of Time magazine as one of their 3 persons of the year for 2005? Bono inspires vision and succeeds in calling people to action because he's harnessed the power of facts and statistics. The name of his organization, DATA, is both an acronym and a reminder of his focus on facts. His fellow persons of the year, Bill and Melinda Gates, chosen for their focus on world health issues, were originally reluctant to meet with him. "World health is immensely complicated," said Bill Gates, recalling their first encounter in 2002. "It doesn't really boil down to let's be nice analysis. So I thought a meeting wouldn't be all that valuable." Gates quickly discovered that Bono understood the issues. "He was every bit the geek that we are," said Gates Foundation chief Patty Stonecipher. "He just happens to be a geek who is a fantastic musician." Others had the same experience. In the U.S. government, Bono has impressed both Democrats and Republicans with his knowledge. If you really want to be effective, you have to bring something to the table beyond just charisma, says Rick Santorum, a conservative Republican senator from Pennsylvania. The important thing is Bono understands his issues better than 99% of members of Congress. Nancy Pelosi, a Democrat, met with Bono for the first time at the gloomy Washington Dulles Airport in Virginia. In a short period, I saw a depth of knowledge that was hugely impressive and a depth of commitment to match, says Pelosi. Following are some of the facts that Bono uses to bolster his argument that the situation in Africa is the defining moral issue of our time. AIDS and poverty together claim the lives of 6,500 Africans every day. More than 28 million Africans are HIV positive, and 2.3 million died of AIDS last year. Without HIV, the average life expectancy in sub-Saharan Africa would be about 63. It's now about 47. Many people have embraced a vision for Africa because these statistics have captured their minds. While sometimes we can be numb to emotional pleas, it's hard to argue with hard data. As you search for your vision, pay attention to the kinds of things you're drawn to learn more about. As you read the newspaper, watch the Discovery Channel, or search the Internet, what interests you intellectually might contain the seeds of a vision that you can embrace. Number 3, involvement can reveal a vision. Some people catch their vision when they roll up their proverbial sleeves and get involved. That's exactly what happened with Kenneth Baring. He'd made money as a successful auto dealer, real estate developer, and football team owner. By 1999, he was already giving money to a variety of causes, including the Smithsonian Museum and the Muscular Dystrophy Association. Then on one of his international trips, Baring agreed to personally drop off some wheelchairs he had helped fund. That's where he had his epiphany. "I've always given money to charity," he said, "but in the past I didn't give myself with it." He wrote about this in his autobiography. When you actually get an opportunity to personally help somebody, he says, it changes your life. Baring was called upon to present one wheelchair to an elderly widower in Romania who had been immobilized by a stroke. He literally picked the man up out of a pile of rags on the ground and gently placed him in the new chair. As the old man sobbed, Baring's life took a new turn. "I have never felt so gratified as when I did that moment," he says. "It took so little to give a wheelchair, and yet it meant so much. I was amazed. I had helped give someone the gift of a new life." Baring went home and founded the Wheelchair Foundation, a nonprofit organization with the mission of leading an international effort to create awareness of the needs and abilities of people with physical disabilities, to promote the joy of giving, create global friendship, and to deliver a wheelchair to every child, teen, and adult in the world who needs one but cannot afford one. For these people, the Wheelchair Foundation delivers hope, mobility, and freedom. Baring's vision for helping people obtain wheelchairs only happened when he got personally involved. Only then did he see what they represented for the poor around the world, giving mobility to the often stigmatized disabled people who previously got around by crawling or dragging themselves. Especially in developing countries, a wheelchair represented new life. A newly mobile person regained status as a human and received a place in their society. Suddenly, they could leave their homes and have some measure of independence again. Even if your heart is stirred or your mind is interested by a vision, it often won't fully take hold until you take a physical step in that direction. As you begin exploring a vision, find a way to get personally involved in it. If it's for foster children, find a way to volunteer with your community's social services. If it's for a retail venture, try out a job in the field. Hands-on experience is often the way to fully engage the vision for your life. Number 4. Passion does not automatically follow vision. In An Anthropologist on Mars, neurologist Oliver Sacks tells about Virgil, a man who had been blind from early childhood. When he was 50, Virgil underwent surgery and was given the gift of sight. But as he and Dr. Sacks found out, having the physical capacity for sight is not the same as seeing. Virgil's first experiences with sight were confusing. He was able to make out colors and movements, but arranging them into a coherent picture was more difficult. Over time, he learned to identify various objects, but his habits, his behaviors, were still those of a blind man. Dr. Sacks asserts, "One must die as a blind person to be born again as a seeing person." The same can be said for some people who seek a vision for their life. Simply finding a vision does not necessarily mean that one will realize it. We've all seen people who can articulate a terrific vision for their life, but they still behave as if they're blind. They still live as if their vision is not real. The reason for this, in my opinion, is because that person's vision is not real. To say it another way, their vision is not authentic. There's an old story, surely apocryphal, about Socrates and a proud student. The student came to Socrates asking for knowledge, so Socrates took him to the sea and pushed him under. As the student came up gasping, Socrates asked him, "What do you want?" The student said, "Knowledge." Socrates plunged the student's head back under the water and asked the question again, "What do you want?" Again he answered, "Knowledge." Finally, after the fourth dunking, the student gave a different answer to Socrates' question of "What do you want?" This time the student said, "Air." "Good," Socrates said. "Now, when you want knowledge as much as you want air, come back and see me. Then we'll talk about knowledge." Like that young man, we sometimes articulate a vision that we don't really believe in. We espouse an appropriate or an impressive vision merely to create, well, an impression. A true vision, one that we feel deep down in our bones, always brings passion along with it. Remember, vision is a picture of the future that gives passion in the present. Vision and passion should be 2 for 1. They're a package deal. When you find a true vision, you have a pulse-quickening experience. You are immediately energized by it. If a heart monitor was strapped to your chest when you were talking about your vision, the difference would be noticeable. Pay attention to your reaction after you articulate a possible vision, because an authentic vision cannot help but to ignite passion. It takes 3 seconds to fuel your passion. The film Walk the Line is based on the life of music legend Johnny Cash. In an early scene, Johnny, played by Joaquin Phoenix, and his 2 band members are auditioning for their first contract with music executive Sam Phillips. The song that they've chosen is a common gospel tune with passionate lyrics, but Phillips stops them after only 1 stanza. Hold on. I hate to interrupt," he said, "but do you guys got something else?" After an awkward pause, Phillips explains, "I'm sorry, I don't record material that doesn't sell. Mr. Cash, the gospel like that just doesn't sell." "Was it the gospel or the way I sang it?" Cash asked. Both. Well, what's wrong with the way I sing it? I don't believe you. You saying I don't believe in God? Johnny's friends attempt to escort him out, but he pushes forward. I want to understand. I mean, we came down here, we played for a minute, and he tells me I don't believe in God. You know exactly what I'm telling you, Philip says. We've already heard that song 100 times, just like that, just like how you sang it. Johnny protests. Well, you didn't let us bring it home. Bring it home? Phillips asks in disbelief. All right, let's bring it home. If you was hit by a truck and you were lying out in that gutter dying, and you had time to sing one song people would remember before your dirt, one song that would let God know what you felt about your time on earth, one song that would sum you up, you telling me that's the song you'd sing? That same Jimmy Davis tune we hear on the radio all day? About your peace within and how it's real and how you're going to shout it? Or would you sing something different, something real, something you felt? Because I'm telling you right now, that's the kind of song people want to hear. That's the kind of song that truly saves people. We all want to sing that kind of song, don't we? Even if you're not a musician, you need to sing a song that you feel deeply, a song that's real and comes from the heart. We only get that song when we forego the first impulse to take whatever comes our way and instead pursue whatever it takes. When we fuel our passion, that's when we bring it home. That's when we elevate our soul to greatness.
You're listening to 3 Seconds by Dr. Les Parrott. This concludes this disc. Please proceed to Disc 3 for the continuation of the program.